Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, our fourth event for World Mental Health Month this month. So far we've had events focusing on supporting good mental health within the UN system. In week 2, we had a partnership with the UN Globe and talked to some of our LGBTIQ plus colleagues about their experiences. In week 3, which was last week, we had an event on mental health and racial discrimination, and we had some amazing external and internal speakers talking about how we can look after ourselves and our colleagues. All of those events were recorded, so if you weren't able to attend, they are or will be available online through our website, and we'll be sharing the links to those. Firstly, because I keep forgetting to say thank you to IAEA, who developed our welcome video for this year. They've done a fantastic job, so thank you to our colleagues there. So today we're going to be talking about welcoming and supporting our colleagues who are experiencing a mental health condition. And I always question as we're talking about this, because what we know is any one of us could experience a mental health condition. We really need to be making sure we're able to talk about this within the UN system and reduce the stigma. And I know we've all been through circumstances in the last 18 months or so, and many other times during our lives where we've had challenges. We haven't always been ourselves, and we need to be shifting things. So it's okay to say when we're not okay, and that includes for those who are experiencing a mental health condition, and to make sure we're able to provide support where we need to. So we've got an amazing group of panelists today, and I am looking forward to having a conversation with them. Mustn't forget to introduce myself. My name's Therese Fitzpatrick. I'm the Global Lead for the UN System Workplace Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy. So the strategy was launched a few years ago. We commenced implementation in 2019, and I work with an amazing implementation board with representatives across the UN system and across many disciplines. So it really is a team effort to get these events off the ground and undertake many of the other activities that we're doing. Just obviously want to say this conversation may be challenging for some, particularly if you're going through a hard time or through the experiencing some challenges. So we do have a list of the counsellors across the UN system, and we'll be posting a list of those within the chat. We will have a Q&A session towards the end, so please write your questions in the chat box. We'll have the chance to talk about those. We've got some time at the end. In the meantime, obviously ask everybody to keep yourself on mute and cameras off so we can see the group of panelists that are before us. We will be sending a follow-up email. The event will be recorded, so just obviously be mindful of that with your sharing. And we will share that with you throughout the event. So enough from me. Let me tell you about the amazing panelists we have today. And we have 5 of them, so a wealth of information. So firstly, we have Tanya Quinn Maguire. She's the president of FICSA, the Federation of International Civil Service Associations. She's been actively championing issues related to staff mental health and wellbeing for many years. She spoke as the staff representative of the launch of the strategy and continues to serve as a member of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Implementation Board. Welcome, Tanya, and thank you for joining us. Then we have Melanie Dalton. Melanie Dalton, she's the implementation coordinator for the Office of Information and Communications Technology. She supports the implementation of ICT solutions for UN field missions. She's been with the UN for 13 years and has also worked in the private sector. She's also an active member of our advisory group and has been really advising us on helping us on many projects. And she also spoke at a similar event last year, so great to be able to hear her wisdom again. Welcome, Melanie. Third, we have Stephen Talgandi. He's the Chief HIV/AIDS Officer at UNIFIL in Lebanon. He's got extensive international and community experience in HIV and AIDS program management, advocacy, community mobilisation and capacity building. He also has qualifications in public health and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience. He's also on our advisory group. Welcome, Stephen. Then we have Eve Ganazi. She's an operation analyst by profession. She's got a Bachelor of Business Administration, has been working with UNAIDS as a finance and administrative assistant since 2012. She's also served as vice chairperson for the UNAIDS Staff Association. She's also a member of our advisory group and has been helping us with our Leaders and Managers program. Thank you and welcome, Eve. And our fifth speaker is Joseph Brody. He's the staff psychologist at DMOSH, which is the Department of Health Management and Occupational Safety and Health. I think I've got that right. In his role on the medical entitlements team at New York headquarters, he manages mental health related sick leave, return to work and medical evacuations of staff throughout the UN system. Thank you for joining us, Joseph. So we would like to start with a question for our attendees today. So we will pop this up on the screen and also in the chat box so that you can access it. While we're doing that, I'll give you a moment to think about the question, which is, what is one thing you want the UN or your organisation to do to support mental health? So what is one thing you would like you or your organisation to support mental health? I'm looking for that to come up on the screen and for it to be in the chat box. Okay, what we might do, maybe just start add your comments into the chat box might be the easiest way for us to go today, and we can have a look at what some of the things. I'm using you as my source to work out what we should focus on next and what you would like to see happen. And I see, we've got Josette with us. Welcome, Josette. You had a comment.
Yes.
We have the Slido.
Hi.
We have Josette, go.
Just to answer to the first question, I want to introduce myself. I'm Josette Spreer, at the head of the Joint Medical Services for ESCWA in Beirut Youth Station. And my request is a basic request to have at least at the level of every commission, social commission, namely ESCWA, at least to have a stress counselor on board, at least one, especially in those hardship youth stations where we all need support from the medical and down to every staff member with all the accumulation of stressors. And each time, starting from COVID to Beirut bombing, the port explosion, to the financial crisis, and we all know that Beirut is well known as a medevac center, and now with the crisis, we are losing a lot of our resources. And it's a family youth station, but at the same time, we have a lot of the international staff, even the local, having their families outside youth station because they cannot handle the present situation here in the country. So we have a lot of challenges, and we know that those challenges will not be cleared very soon. And that's why I believe that all the headquarters commissions need to have at least one on-board stress counselor to support also the other small UN entities which are within our duty station. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I can see people are putting their answers into to Menti, and there's a few key themes coming up. So destigmatize, and that is obviously a lot about work, what we're talking about today. There's 4 key themes in the strategy, and one is around welcoming and supporting staff who are experiencing a mental health condition, and reducing stigma is absolutely key to that. We also look at creating a healthy working environment, so thinking about prevention of poor mental health and how can we think about our working environment and reduce the risk of poor mental health. And I can see sort of walk the talk. And I feel like that really links in with that. If we're talking about mental health and well-being, how can we truly change the UN system so that we are supporting the mental health of all of our staff? And the theme of the strategy is a better workplace for a healthy world. No, healthy workplace for a better world. I just got that the wrong way around. So it shows that we can't do our job if we don't look after our staff. Mandatory training. We recently have released some training for leaders and managers, which we'll share the link to. Empathy and compassion is absolutely key to this. So I am going to look at everything that was written there, and I think we can also take this back to the implementation board and have us think about, what does this mean? What are we hearing from staff about what we should focus on next? So I'm seeing on the Slido, as well as lots of comments coming up in the chat. So I thank you. And I know that, and obviously making sure we've got the support available. So our counsellors do a phenomenal job. There is always more to be done, and we need to make sure we've got equal access for everybody within the UN system. So thank you everybody for your input. Without further ado, I would like to turn to our panelists. So I might start with you, Stephen. Just would you like to introduce yourself and how you came to be on the panel today?
I'm Stephen Tarugendi. You've already introduced me. I happen to be a survivor of mental health, and this is especially related to burnout at the workplace. One before I joined the UN, and the other after I was working for the UN. And that is how I find myself here. So probably as Teresa said, we are here to share experiences, have a conversation about what are the issues and how we overcome them. For me, I just want to share a few highlights. One is how mental health evolves in our day-to-day lives. And to me, I look at a past experience, a personal past experience where I've worked for government, I've worked for the military in both conflict and post-conflict. And here I'm working for the United Nations. And when I look at conflict and post-conflict and military, and I'm working on HIV, so I know what it actually means. I come from Uganda, and there was a lot of lessons we learned from post-conflict situations. Therefore, it gives me the passion for the work I'm doing. But I also remember that when I was working for civil society organizations, we used a lot instruments produced by the United Nations, Security Council, General Assembly resolutions, international commitments of all kinds. And therefore, when I got a UN position, I thought it is time to do the right thing with the right people within the right environment. And therefore, this one raised my expectations to a certain level that probably came out to haunt me up to date. That every time I remember my civil society experience and what I saw when I got the UN, I was like, what do I learn from this? As I said, use of UN produced instruments and international commitments. I became that dedicated guy. But when I got in here, I saw the first thing that hit me was diversity. From Uganda, I had a different set of knowledge and information, competences around HIV. When I got into the organization, it was the opposite. Everybody had their own way of understanding it. This was the first challenge. Then the other thing was some of the resolutions talk about integrated collaboration. But collaboration, when I got in here, I found it quite elusive. It was nowhere to find it. Everybody was busy working on their own business. Everybody is busy doing their work. When you go to introduce an issue to collaborate, it became quite difficult in certain extent. Then I have observed another thing. Those are informal and formal engagements of personnel, of staff. I work with peacekeeping, and in peacekeeping, we almost know everybody. Everybody knows everybody. We are interconnected. And therefore, gossip with one person is gossip with the entire organization. Anything you talk about really links to everybody, and therefore, the environment became a little difficult for us when we were working on HIV and the stigma that was attached to it, especially propagated by the gossips, the talk. I found this almost at all levels of the organization, from the senior level to the most junior, from the professional technical service providers. I saw it even within among ourselves as health workers, whereby you find a health worker gossiping about a patient they saw. And so you find everybody, here we have the coffee breaks, may I call them gospel breaks? There is nothing interesting that happens that it doesn't come out of gossip. And this I continued to experience. The more I established the unit, the more I went out into the field, the more I saw how widespread it was. Little did I know that it was actually, it started impacting on me gradually as these events emerge. One thing I've learned here that probably anybody can learn from that, mental health is not a one-off incident. It is an accumulation of events. I also learned that as human beings, we are not victims of circumstances, but we are processors of experience. Any incident reminds you of the other risk you had last time. And this one grew up and grew up because I reached a level of burning out, totally burnt out. The demand on myself as I saw the environment in which I was working was so high. I thought I'm that magic bullet to change this, I think. As I did that, I started to even create unrealistic tasks for myself in order to make sure that I reach everybody and everywhere. I got frustrated instead in the process. But then, as I said, these frustrations continued to grow on me. And then, before I realized, my lifestyle towards my own health changed. I am diabetic, so I started to affect my health-seeking behavior. My visits to the clinic reduced. My time even talk to my doctor like I used to do reduced. I was not cooperative. I developed unhealthy eating habits. I couldn't eat anything yet. I'm diabetic, I'm supposed to control certain things. I drank some wine here and there, and what happened? My health, I almost succumbed to the lifestyle I chose. I realized I was in the middle of a busy week, 2 busy weeks. I could not tell my colleagues that, look, guys, I cannot go. My legs were swollen from the knees to the feet down. I didn't even bother to call my doctor. I went to stand. I remember I was running a training and I felt that my feet could no longer fit into my shoes. So I removed the shoes, and then one of the doctors that was in the audience told me, Stephen, I think you needed to pay some kind of attention. That's when I said, oh, I think I need to call up my doctor. Anyway, this is a short story that I'm sharing, but I'm trying to show how the evolution of mental health events can end up in seriously devastating situations. How did I respond? I was suffering the mental health alone every moment. I'm known to smile. And everybody was always telling me, Stephen, you never feel the impact of this work environment. But inside me, I was dying. I was crushing myself, trying to make myself the magic bullet, trying to do everything for everybody. I knew HIV-related risks that I was seeing every day from people who seek HIV testing to us, the stories they were telling me, and then I could hear different things from management, from colleagues here and there, and I was like, are these people serious? So I found that I needed to talk to somebody about what I was experiencing. I could not sleep. I could not do anything. So I opened up with somebody. I talked to Fabrizio. I watched, actually, the other lesson that I learned here is that the more we have people who share experiences, the better for the rest of the staff members. Because this time I didn't want to talk to anybody in here, but I needed somebody at least to listen to. So I saw Fabrizio's video, and I said, this is somebody I know. I sent him an email. The next day he called me back. And we were talking, then he told me, Stephen, yes, you are going through so much, but have you thought of the self? Have you thought of you? You are thinking about the big environment, but where are you in all this? What are you doing about yourself? I talked to another colleague, Martina Clark. She was in New York, and she sent me an email, and she said, the system is a giant beast, so do not let it kill you up. So I was like, oh, okay. That's when I started realizing that I had to do something quick. I introduced self-awareness exercises, using emotional intelligence, trying to refine myself. I practiced mindfulness, especially looking at gratitude. And in fact, that was one of my best successes, because I started focusing on what I got in different situations, the little successes that I'd registered, the number of participants, the way colleagues were responding, the kind of feedback that different clients that gave to me. And I was like, okay, I need to focus on this. And I started training myself. Every moment I was alone, I did that. Then I started the physical activities, running away from now the failure, the guilt that I was feeling because I had failed to make a difference within. So I started running. Whenever I ran, I realized I could get back home, sleep comfortably.
Yes.
And I would wake up in the morning feeling quite fresh, and I changed my health-seeking behaviors. It improved significantly. I'm trying to rush into a long.
Yes.
so
Thank you.
I'm just now. I want to end with something. Support to staff. We need to understand and recognize and clarify the context, the mental health issues, and how much they are widespread. Some people think that it doesn't exist. That's why we have one staff counselor for a group of over 10,000 people. And then the other thing is, we should also put into context the socio-ecological needs of different people. You see somebody with mental health, but the issues behind that person are much bigger than the person. So long as you don't focus on the other elements, then you are likely to miss an important thing. The final one is innovative strategies. Somebody talked about creating awareness, but we need people who identify changes in behavior, in social interactions, so that it can be identified early and responded to early. We need a health system approach, because this is multi-sectoral, this is intersectoral, this cuts across all areas. As I said, I've seen it in leadership, I've seen it in workers, I've seen it in health workers, I've seen it everywhere, which means each one of us has a role to play.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephen. There is so much wisdom in there, and I can see people commenting in the chat box about how powerful it is to hear colleagues talk about it, and particularly I know men can find it really difficult to speak up. So there are so many words of wisdom there from you, both around how you looked after yourself, but also how our system can work and all of the many factors that come into play. So I'm going to turn to Melanie. So it'd be good to just briefly hear about what brought you, how you ended up on this panel today.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So I'm Melanie, and Therese was very generous in her introduction to me. So I'll just talk about my involvement with the group and the panel. I'm from India originally, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder over 20 years ago. I declared my condition when I did my medical check with the UN, and it was still accepted, which was very, very heartening. So that's a brief introduction for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for joining us here today. And I know you've got so many words of wisdom to share, and particularly given you shared last year and the impact since then. So I'm looking forward to asking you some further questions. Eve.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. As introduced, I'm Evelyn Jonazi, based in Malawi, UNAIDS. My main two health issues started some time back. My husband was an alcoholic, and his alcoholism led to his loss of a job. So he became jobless. We came back to Malawi. I was struggling, and we were both jobless. We had kids. And it continued to an extent that I lost him in 2011. So upon his death, I decided to check myself and see how I move forward. So in December 2011, my medical checkup told me I was HIV positive. Everything was okay, but my HIV was positive. Then I was still jobless. I felt numb. It was difficult. I had the fear of unknown because I had kids who were now looking up to me. So I became the rock of the family, including to take care also of my siblings. And then come March, I was offered a job at UNAIDS. I jumped at it. It was a blessing for me. Unfortunately, I don't know how my supervisor, he made me feel free, and I declared my status to him that I was HIV positive, because I felt UNAIDS is a place they are dealing with HIV, so maybe I'll find my answers there. And my supervisor, Mr. Patrick Brenner, really helped me. He immediately referred me to UN+. So UN+, I joined there. I found buddies, we shared experiences, we disciplined each other, and I became so strong. I felt stigma and discrimination around. People were so stigmatizing. So I decided to stand up for the voiceless in my church community and declared my status. My target was to tackle the faith healing, because people were dying of HIV. I wanted people to change the way they were talking so that we embrace each other. And I became the model there. So apart from that, I also declared to my children, who are my support system, my siblings, and then disclosure openly at a UN function, and then the public function at a national level. It gave me the freedom, because even if people talk about me, I didn't care because I declared openly. So that helped me. Another thing that helped me was the exercising, because my blood pressure was now an issue, and then gardening. Then as I coped with HIV, now it's just a status to me, things were normal. COVID kicked in. As a result, I've lost 2 brothers within a space of 10 days. This has been a hit. We're still dealing with it. We had to mourn them, because, you know, with COVID deaths, you really don't have time to mourn. It's quick. You lose somebody, you bury. But there are impacts that come with it, because those brothers left children. Those children, they are looking up to me. I lost both parents, so I'm the mother figure in my family. So to take up all those, it's really not easy. But my thanks go to management in Malawi, the UNCT, because we have a vibrant UN Cares team where there are programs that help us. It really helps me, including the UN Plus. So for me, my special thanks to the UNCT in Malawi for this program. I would urge management also to consider this because it really helps. It really helps because we are so free with each other in UN Plus, even in UN Cares. This helps a lot. Thank you so much, Therese. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Eve, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here, knowing you've been through so much recently. And thank you to our three panelists who've spoken already and shared their experiences. And again, I'm seeing amazing discussion in the chat about how much it is appreciated. And as we say, you know, we'd like it to become normal and okay for people to feel that they can share their experiences. And that's not okay for everybody. And I'm not saying that everybody should disclose, but you can see that it can have such a powerful impact when people do, and it really moves us a long way to reduce the stigma. I would now like to talk to Tanya to hear about your experiences around these issues.
Hi, Therese. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tanya Quinn-McGuire. I'm the president of the Federation of International Civil Servants Associations. And I've been a UN staff member for almost 30 years, so it makes me feel very old. But most recently, I worked for UNAIDS. While I was working for UNAIDS, I worked as the UNAIDS Staff Association Secretariat. And this was a role where I was in contact with staff on a regular basis, and people would come to me and literally in the middle of a mental health crisis. And the amount of times I had staff members in my office sobbing uncontrollably, not wanting me to let anybody else know their status, not wanting me to even call medical services because they were so terrified of the stigma that would be attached to them if anybody understood that they had had a breakdown or they were showing weakness in any way, shape or form. I've had my own personal experiences with mental health problems. I have family members with major mental health problems. And I was shocked to see that within our own workplace, we weren't able to deal with those issues. And I think that working for UNAIDS, like Evelyn, you see, I worked with a lot of activists where we were used to dealing with controversial issues. We were used to talking about things that nobody else wanted to speak about. And through the networks in UNAIDS, those people inspired me to bring the voice of people living with mental health to the UN system. We brought it, the UNAIDS Staff Association brought it up at the federation level, where I now am at the federation level. And at that federation level, we realized that it was a common issue. And one of the things we were most worried about is helping staff, not staff coming to us for help, but us doing more harm than good. And because there was such a stigma around speaking about mental health, we could not signpost staff to the right people and make sure that they were getting the right sort of advice. And coming to me, and in as much as I have my own personal experience, I am not a mental health expert, and I was terrified of doing harm to these staff members. So I really thought we needed a better policy at a workplace level. So that's when I got involved on behalf of the Federation at the then working group on mental health and well-being. And we finally got it launched as a strategy in 2018. I was so proud to speak as a staff member in 2018, and I was just looking there as everybody was filling out the Slido, and the same sort of comments in 2018 are still relevant today, that people are still talking about stigma, still people are talking about please don't blame the staff members, talking about training managers, walking the talk, being transparent. So these issues are still there. So in as much as we are having a wonderfully open conversation, And it's been more than an inspiration to see people like Evelyn and Stephen and Melanie speaking and being open that we would not have had back in 2018. We couldn't have had people being as honest and open and as brave as you are. We still have a long, long way to go. So I applaud you. And those of you who are in the chat saying that you're inspired by Stephen and Melanie and Evelyn, please pass that feeling on to others. Let other people know that they can speak to you, that you're open. We've made those massive strides, but I still see staff coming forward more and more, and the impact of COVID, of course, over the last 18 months, while it's been a horrific experience for so many people, and Evelyn has shared the experiences of losing family members and loved ones. It's also shone a light on mental health issues, and I think that these events that we've had all this month, thanks to Therese and her team, it's really an example of how the UN has stepped forward and made movement on this issue, despite what seems like an incredibly slow pace. We seem finally to be catching up with the rest of the world. And I'm very proud to be part of that, and very proud to be part of such a brave panel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for being an absolute champion in this area. And I agree, it is amazing to see the change that's happened, but we know that there's still a long way to go. And I think it's important for us to remember that we're talking about a significant workplace change, a significant culture change, and that we know that doesn't happen overnight. But it is important that we do celebrate the wins and celebrate that things have changed and acknowledge we've still got a long way to go, but we are on a journey. I will now turn to Joseph. Welcome, Joseph. And you're on mute.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to this really impressive panel. I mean, hearing these stories openly and publicly, I agree 100% is really powerful. And just hearing the strength and the willingness to share. It's not for everybody, as you mentioned, Therese, to be so open, but when people do that, it can provide a lot of inspiration to others and support to others. It's also important to sometimes keep things private and confidential. And I hope to talk a little bit about that today too. Let me introduce myself. My name is Joseph Brody. I'm the staff psychologist in the UN Secretariat. In the earlier part of my UN career, I was working as a staff counselor. Now I'm working in the medical section of UN Secretariat on medical entitlements, doing a lot of sick leave case management, helping medical director implement sick leave policies in the UN while working with staff, sometimes with doctors, around sick leave issues, medical evacuations, return to work issues, and these kinds of things. So I'm really involved day to day in facilitating sick leave and facilitating healthy and safe transitions back to work. So these are the kinds of stories that I'm hearing all the time. And I know that we have big issues with mental health and in making sure that the organization is welcoming to people with mental health issues and helping people to get the care that they need, both inside the system with staff counseling and outside the system with their own doctors and therapists. We have a lot of improvements to make around the role of management in helping facilitate healthier workplaces. We have a lot of work to do, but as Therese also mentioned, we have made a lot of gains. Back in 2015, we did a mental health survey across the system, and we found that there are higher rates of people reporting mental health systems in the UN than we would otherwise expect in the general population. And so that's why we're pushing this, and that's why we're talking about it, and that's why our colleagues here today are being willing to open to talk about this, because we do have work to do to change the culture, and we really want to make sure that we are welcoming to staff with mental health. So thanks again for inviting me. If I can help in any way with any information about mental health sick leave or any other issues, I'd be glad to contribute further. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And you have also obviously been involved with the mental health strategy since before it was a strategy with leading the work on that survey. And again, you're a wealth of knowledge and provide so much support to UN personnel. Speaking of the survey, this is a perfect segue. We're going to just give you some brief information around the survey we did in 2021, which I'm sure many of you filled out. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Daniela Milic, who's a HR policy officer at ICSC and is also a honorary member of my team. Welcome, Daniela.
Hello, Therese. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody. First of all, I've just been taking a breath and really absorbing everything that colleagues have shared. So thank you so very much. And with all your indulgence, I have prepared a presentation, but I'm going to skip through to just a few slides to give you a flavor, but I will share the rest of it with you just for the interest of time, and we can move on. So let me just... this is always a challenge for me, but here we go. So just, are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm not sure.
You might. We might need to unhighlight you.
Could you please?
Try again.
Let's try again. Are we there now? We're good?
Yes.
Thank you so much. So as Therese mentioned, this was the survey that we held this year. So the results have just came out, and we called it the UN-wide Health Survey 2021 because there was a variety of questions in the survey that were not necessarily just linked to mental health, but to overall health. So we had 19,034 responses from across 23 different organizations, including the Secretariat, the IOMs, and the UNHCRs, and others. And I think Joseph mentioned that speaking openly is not for everybody, but this survey was completely anonymous. So colleagues and not just staff members, but interns, consultants, everybody was invited to respond to the survey. So we consider this to be a pretty good turnout. We had about 12% overall, of course, from some organizations smaller and larger, that percentage varied. So there was a whole host of like 218 questions. So of course, it's going to be tough for me to give you a lot of information here, but I'll specifically zoom in on the mental health and well-being part of that. And I'm just going to advance through here a bit to just sort of, this is one thing I wanted to show you. One question: how often do you feel tense, anxious, and or depressed? 30%, that's 1/3 of our respondents almost said that they felt stressed, anxious, or depressed either often or always. So this is just a very interesting thing for us to note, especially in these times of pandemic. The main sources of stress, and this probably will not come as a surprise to you, the two top stressors, so to speak, were high work hours and high workload and demands. There we have 38% in the kind of red zone, and followed by lack of time for family, friends, or personal pursuits at 30%. So those two are kind of correlated as well. So when we're talking about the role of managers, the role of like workplace in our mental health, I think this is something that really needs to be taken seriously. In terms of the support, and I think Evelyn and others also mentioned the role of the supervisor in kind of creating that psychologically safe space. When we ask respondents to the survey to talk about, to indicate to us where they need more support from, well, the number one, the top most frequently chosen answer was my manager, my supervisor, where we see 49%, then followed by friends and family, colleagues and work, and so on and so forth. The other bit at the bottom, which we found encouraging, to what extent do you believe that mental health condition can be treated successfully? Overwhelming majority actually says that yes, either to a great extent or to some extent. And to what extent can one's risk for developing some mental health condition can be reduced? There we also see that we actually believe that we can do something to help reduce our risks. In terms of counseling or mental health treatment, we actually see that a small number here, about 24% of respondents have considered engaging in counseling or mental health. And those who have considered it, actually only about 46% of them went on to actually avail of those resources. And that's really about 2,000 people of the 19,000, just to put things into perspective here. In terms of why not using the counseling or mental health, and there's a lot of myths and a lot of stigma we need to hopefully shatter when we talk about these kind of results, is that not enough time. Well, we got to try to find time for ourselves and our mental health. Then the next reason was I prefer to see someone outside of my workplace. Then I was concerned that counseling would not be confidential. So those are some of the reasons why we actually don't avail of the resources where they are there. Let me move on to stigma and discrimination, because this is something that our team works very hard on to try to break stigma. To what extent have you experienced stigma or discrimination in your agency or organization due to your mental health? Here we see about 21% said to some extent or to a great extent. And then we ask also, are you aware of colleagues in your workplace who have experienced or are experiencing mental health conditions? Here we see 38% of people said yes. So we kind of, in other words, stories that Evelyn and Stephen and Tanya shared are not as unique as we might think. This actually happens more frequently than we may even be aware of. In terms of to what extent have you known colleagues who've experienced stigma or discrimination due to mental health? Here we wanted to just highlight the 43% were sort of said either to some extent or to a great extent. And then the other question that was also important going forward, the question we asked people to respond to the following statement: in the future, I would be willing to work with someone with a mental health condition. And here we see the majority of our colleagues actually said that they agreed with that statement, either strongly or slightly. But this is like 70% who said, yes, they would want to work with someone with a mental health condition. We have a 19% that they don't know, perhaps because there's a lot of lack of information or lack of understanding of what it means to have a mental health condition. And we have 5% then who strongly disagreed with that statement. So moving forward, and I won't go too much into detail here, basically we have a lot of work ahead of us. We want to analyze this data. We want to continue the conversation. We want to make sure that we keep this dialogue going, that we use the survey data to inform our work, to make sure that we evaluate the work that we currently do, that we correlate data between the 2015 survey that Joseph mentioned. We also had a COVID survey 2020, which results are available, and I'll drop that in the chat as soon as I'm finished. So in other words, that we're not just like blindly going forward, that we were really taking action in a way that addresses the needs that you have provided. So if you're not feeling comfortable to speak about it, please make sure that we hear what your needs are so that we can actually take action in that way. The 19,000 voices that have spoken, we want to make sure that they get heard, whether like in an individual way, like some of the more courageous colleagues do. But in other words, our message, talk to us, we're listening. I just want to underscore that. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Over to you, Therese.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And I know I gave you a hard task to try and summarize the data, but I think it is really important that we're hearing personal stories and individual stories, and then we can see what's happening across the UN system, and it gives us a lot of food for thought about where to from here. And also, leave me back. And before I say this, I'm mindful that time moves incredibly quickly. I think I want to make sure we do have time to hear a few questions from the floor, but I've got some questions for the panelists. So I think we'll run about 10 minutes over time. Apologies for those who will need to leave, but we are recording the session, so you'll be able to see it later. The first question is around what support or assistance made a difference to you. And I know we've heard quite a bit from Steve and Evie about this. So I'd like to turn to you, Melanie, to get a sense from you about what support made a difference for you.
Thank you, Teres. So ever since I joined the UN, even before I joined the UN, because it was part of my reference check or my medical check, I felt supported. So for me, from the very beginning, I felt like there was a space for people with mental health conditions. I've had several major episodes, a couple of them while working at the UN. So I've had the support of being able to take sick leave, and my management has been super supportive, especially after the panel discussion last year. We've had a lot of open conversations. The last couple of years have been very difficult because of COVID and losing a lot of loved ones. So I have two major things to highlight with support from my team. One is they let me know when I'm on fire, which is, so it reminds me to slow down. And also my management has been excellent about being flexible with, allowing me to be flexible with, because 9 to 5 is not always possible. And also work from home when needed, and so on. So it's been a great support. I think the UN was already quite far ahead compared to most other organizations in the corporate sector. And even though we have a lot of work to do, I think we're definitely ahead of the game. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And it's fantastic to hear that your managers have been so supportive. That makes such a difference. And hearing that small flexibility can make a big difference when somebody needs that. And I'm not sure if we've posted, but as I mentioned, we do have training now for leaders and managers that's been recently released. I'll make sure everybody gets the link to that for yourselves. I think it's useful and obviously if you're a manager, and then obviously share with your colleagues, your managers, to make sure everybody's learning more about how to support colleagues. Eve, did you have anything you would like to add?
Thanks, Therese. What I want to add is acceptance. Acceptance helps a lot when a situation presents itself to you. Because only after you accept a situation, then you start dealing with it. But when you're in denial, it becomes very difficult. You get questions like, why me? Why me? And then you get worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Stephen.
Well, as I said earlier, you know, most of the time, it makes a huge difference when you find somebody to talk to in confidence. And probably this is one of the biggest things that we can give somebody. Because I realized that what matters to somebody is the moment, is now. When I come to talk to you, when I find time to open up and talk to you, what I need is something now. I can have so many things in the past or ambitions and career aspirations, but what is important is what I'm feeling now, what I'm going through right now, and what I need from you. That's what I want the listening ear, objective ear, without judgment, with compassion, with appropriate, stand in my shoes. Stand in my shoes, be empathetic enough. Let us be empathetic to each other. Let us also imagine that when I gossip with this one, I'm gossiping with everybody. And each one of us receives the message totally differently. And so this is the environment that I would be really looking forward for. I'm happy that I have a very good relationship with the staff counselor here. I call her in time of the day, in time of, even if it is at night. Those days I could call her and I would say, "Are you awake?" She would say, "Yes, I'm here for you." So this is the difference we can make in each other's lives.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I think empathy and sympathy is really important for us to think about. You know, it is not our job to fix somebody's issues, but being there for them can make such a big difference. So, and I think that's what can often stop people helping, because they feel scared, or they're sure, they feel like they're going to do something wrong, or they've got to fix it. And I think the key is being there for people and helping them to get to help if they need it. So Tanya, just turning to you, you always have good ideas for us and looking to the future. From everything you've heard today, what else do you think the UN should be doing to reduce stigma?
Oh my goodness, it's a big question. I think we've done a lot, as a lot of people have said. I think it's been great, a lot of strides towards having more counsellors available, more openness, sick leave, as Joseph was addressing, all of those issues. We made a lot of movements. Where I find we could do a lot more is acknowledging the impact of a toxic workplace, of negative work environments on our mental health, and how we have a duty of care as an organisation, as managers, as colleagues, to look at to avoid that. We don't have an excuse anymore. They can't say they don't understand the impact, because we have shown through the mental health strategy that the impact of a toxic workplace on people's mental health is enormous. And I think COVID has also shone yet again another highlight on that. I was reading a great article recently that showed how our brain works so much better when we're predictable. We live in a predictable world. We've evolved to be uncertainty adverse. And so COVID has thrown us into a very uncertain world. It's made it even more difficult for staff to deal with the uncertainties around the economic climate, job stability, whether we are getting on with our manager, we're not getting on with our manager. All of these issues are so much more out there. And if management could acknowledge that we all have a role to play in that, but management specifically have a key role to play in that, and that if they could set expectations with realistic goals, if they could manage to be honest, to have an honest and an empathetic sort of way of communicating with staff, I think we could go even further, and we could really go for a mentally healthy workplace. I'm not sure that exists anywhere in the world right at this moment. But we can strive toward that. And my whole feeling is that we're the United Nations. We should be a shining light for the world. We should be the example that people are following. We should not be trotting behind the rest of the world on this. And I am sure every time I'm part of an event like this, I'm sure that because of people like Stephen and Ev and Joseph and Melanie and yourself, Therese, and Daniela and all the other fabulous people, that we will get there, but management need to take that role and take it seriously, and not just give, not just tick a box. They actually need to walk that talk and say, this is what we want in our workplace, a mentally healthy workplace, an environment where people can be themselves and be open and be safe above all. So I think big job, but we can get there.
Thank you, Tanya. And I do think we need to aim big. We should be leaders in this space. We've got a long way to go, but we're the UN. We can create change, and we can make sure we are leading the world in this area. It will take time, but it's making sure we're taking the steps now to get there. Now I'd like to turn to you, Joseph. to hear from you. What advice would you give UN colleagues about what they can do to support somebody they're working with? And also, obviously, you know quite a bit about sick leave and where that may play a role within this. So I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Therese. First of all, in terms of your first question, in terms of support, in general, listening is always a good idea if you want to support a colleague. Listening actively, listening empathically, listening without interrupting and needing to jump in to try to solve all their problems. That's one way that you can be supportive to colleagues. But I also want to add that there's been some things said about wanting to have a supportive manager and how important that is, and I agree. But we also need to understand that when you speak with your manager, that's not a confidential conversation, of course. And so be mindful of how much you do want to share with your manager. Sometimes you may want to be open, and sometimes it might be wiser to be cautious about how much you share. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. And it really depends on your individual circumstances. From the manager's point of view, managers have a very important responsibility to their staff, and managers need to be able to balance productivity of their teams with the well-being of staff. And this is a very important managerial skill. It's not necessarily something that we train formally, but it's part of management. It's not just all productivity. It's also making sure that we have a healthy and safe workplace and that the well-being of the staff is taken into account. Fortunately, that also leads to more productive and more satisfied workplaces and teams. So there is that advantage as well. But being able to communicate with people, and if you are a manager and you have concerns about staff member, it's possible to be empathic without invading privacy. And it's an important thing for managers to remember is that you can express human concern without invading somebody's privacy. You don't need to know everything that's going on. You don't need to know their condition or their diagnosis or their situation, but you can express concern. And if managers think that somebody might need to be on leave for health reasons, they can always, turn to their medical UN medical clinic to ask about that, and so that we can try to facilitate sick leave if it's needed. And of course, the staff member, if you have any questions about sick leave, you can always turn to your UN medical clinic to get answers about that, or you can write to us at sickleave@un.org, and we can point you in the right direction. There's a lot about sick leave that we can talk about, but let me just emphasize the confidentiality piece here, because I saw in the chat there were someone wrote that we need to be able to give people sick leave for mental health reasons without judgment, and this is absolutely 100% true. It's important to remember that whenever you are getting sick leave, when your medical service approves your sick leave, the only thing that they are approving and communicating to human resources or any other part of the organization is the days that you're on sick leave. There's no information about why you're on sick leave. There's no diagnosis. There's no indication whether it's physical or mental or a combination. So if you are concerned about stigma, you may want to keep that information to yourself. It's very personal situation. We have people here who are being very open about their own condition, and that really does help break down stigma. But for other people, it's important for them to keep that private, and that's perfectly okay too. And in some cases, it might actually be a good idea just to protect yourself, depending on where you are. Until we have a more supportive workplace culture everywhere in the UN system. So, just be wary about sharing your medical details with not only, your own team, but also with human resources. When you share medical documents with human resources, that is not confidential. If you're uploading it in Umoja or another system to request sick leave, that is not confidential. So whenever you're uploading into an HR portal, take out any information about diagnosis or any other medical information, because that is not confidential. In contrast, whenever you are sending any medical information to UN Medical or to any medical clinics in the UN for sick leave purposes, and we do ask for details for longer sick leave because we want to make sure that you're receiving appropriate care, and we want to keep an eye on you, and we want to help you transition back to work. Whenever you're sending your medical details to UN Medical, that is kept strictly confidentially, like in any external medical clinic, just like if you go to the hospital. That is kept strictly confidential, is not shared with any other part of the organization. So there's a big difference between sharing your medical documents with medical and sharing your documents with anywhere else in the UN, or speaking about your condition elsewhere in the UN. It's important for people to know. We ask that for longer periods of sick leave, and this is, I think, generally true across the UN system for medical divisions, for longer periods of sick leave, we do ask that you consult a medical specialist, a psychiatrist. Some people are being treated by their psychotherapist, by clinical psychologists, or other mental health workers, and that's perfectly appropriate in many situations. But for longer periods of sick leave, you might be asked to see a psychiatrist, even if you don't have a psychiatrist now. And the reason why we do that is that we just want to make sure that you're getting appropriate care and that you've been evaluated. It doesn't mean that you necessarily need to take medication. In some cases, medication is the best thing for you, and in other cases, it's not necessary. But just to be evaluated by a psychiatrist, we want to just make sure that you're getting comprehensive evaluation and comprehensive care. The ultimate treatment decisions are, of course, up to you, but we do have these asks for longer periods of sick leave. And again, if you have any other questions about sick leave at any point, reach out to your medical section. They can answer you confidentially. You can write to us. We could point you in the right direction at sickleave@un.org. But your medical service should be able to answer all your questions about sick leave, including when you can leave the duty station and when you can't, how to get access to medical treatment or to psychological treatment. Your staff counselor can also help you, connect you with mental health professionals. And finally, just going back to your first question, Therese, another way that colleagues can help staff that they see struggling is to encourage them to seek professional help, whether with a staff or stress counselor in the UN or with a doctor or a therapist outside the UN. Try to gently encourage them to seek professional help if you see them really struggling. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joseph. What a wealth of information. And I think that brings up so many different points, right? One around thinking carefully. Obviously, you are experiencing a mental health condition, who you tell and how you tell them, and knowing that the support is there within the UN system. It's important that we do also think about this, both from a promotion, prevention. I'm seeing a lot of comments there about workplaces, and we're really mindful that our working environment plays a big role. It's important that we think about how can we support our colleagues. We've put some resources there in the chat, both around from our website around how to support a colleague, as well as in our information for leaders and managers. There's a module around how to have a conversation with somebody you're concerned about. So there's some great information there that's good for managers and leaders, but I think it's useful for everybody in terms of thinking about having a conversation. Now, we've got a few questions I can see on the Slido. So we'll just take a few minutes to answer some extra questions. The first one I'm just seeing is around talking about help-seeking behaviour. And Stephen, it came when you were speaking. I'm excited to see you as an African man talking about mental health. How do we encourage men in general to improve mental health seeking behaviour? So we know it can be hard for everybody to seek help, but we know that there can be particular issues for males. So what advice, I'll start with you, Stephen, but interested to hear from others as well.
Wow. Well, that's a very interesting question. Remember at the beginning, I started with my background. I talked about my values, different sets of values, my family values, my social values. I believe from my own experience, these values shape a lot on how we seek health care, how we seek support, how we even can express it. Yeah, but as I speak now, having gone through all the breaking the barriers of being held up hostage, because I grew up being told that I'm not supposed to cry when I'm in pain. Yeah, and you don't. I kept on putting on that false smile that I'm okay, everything is good, I'm on top of the world, when I actually wanted care. I wanted to talk to somebody. I guess what, colleagues out there, we all need this support. Let us not be caught hostage by our social values. Yes, they are social constructs. They make us strong in certain ways, but not when you need the care, not even when you need the support. Find, assess, and evaluate the environment around you and say, can I find somebody to talk to? As me, in here on my team, I'm a supervisor, but I picked one of my colleagues that I confided in, and we talked, and she supported me every minute, every other goal. Whenever I wanted to talk, she would be there to talk to me. Just like Joseph said, she could sit down and say, Stephen, even if you want to cry, cry as much as you want. Imagine an African man crying in front of a woman. That was, in a cultural perspective, it is impossible. But this is a situation here. You need help. Don't hold yourself hostage. This environment has so many beautiful people. We may have different experiences that led to the mental breakdown, but there are also so many very beautiful people, very beautiful souls out there that are willing to give you a supporting hand. Reach out.
Thank you, Stephen. Would anybody like to add anything? So I'm not sure if that's somebody speaking. Thank you. Just one, we'll do, I can see there's a lot of questions around mental health, around sick leave. So what we might actually do is we will look at those afterwards and send a written response to those. Sorry, so I'm just going to ask one question around looking at moving beyond the stereotype that mental health issues result from hardship conditions to recognise that most issues are caused by poor management and high workload. And I think that links to what we've been talking about around the working conditions are really important. So any ideas about how we can make sure we're focusing not only on welcoming and supporting our colleagues, but actually really highlighting the issues around thinking about our working environment. That may be a hard question to answer quickly. Tanya.
I think actually going back, because a lot of our offices are now in the process of considering how to return to the office. I think this is an ideal opportunity to look at how we can start again and how we can make sure we don't make the same mistakes as we're moving back into the office environment. When it comes to toxic teams or managers or whatever. And also giving the space and reassuring people that even though we're going back to the office, they can still work from home when they need it. As Melanie pointed out, it can be such a powerful tool to help people who are concerned about their well-being. And it doesn't cost us anything. And COVID has showed us that we can work from home and still be productive and still contribute to the workplace in a very valuable way. So I think that we can use this opportunity to really reassess how we want to rebuild our workplace when we go back. And I think as well, when you look on, there is a lot of resources out there, and I know it keeps popping up in the chat, but so many of us, no matter how many times we've visited the website on mental health and everything else, we forget that resources are there, and just use them. Use those resources. Suggest it to your manager, those trainings and everything else that's on the mental health website. Suggest it to your HR people. And if they're not willing to do it, suggest it to your staff association. If your staff association aren't willing to do it, bring it to your staff federation. I'll do it with you. Very, very well happy to.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And we have shared our website in the chat. There is a wealth of information on there. Also, do follow us on social media, and we'll make sure those links are there as well. Well, I don't even know how to summarize today's session, although now I'm seeing that Stephen's got his hand up just as I was ready to wrap up. Quick word, Stephen.
I talked about champions for mental health. Changing the environment requires so many other people getting involved, voicing out interests and needs of the voiceless. We know that there are so many people suffering in their own cubicles with their mental health situations. We need some people from senior management who can be champions for health, for mental health, that drive and ignite the will to maintain airing out the voices of those that are struggling out there. We know there are many colleagues who could be here listening to us, but they are still looking at the social environment that does not support their mental health needs. And so we need a group, a network of senior people that can voice their needs.
Thank you, Stephen. And that is a really good point. We can't create the change without leadership, and champions are important. Whereas I probably should also give the others a chance for any final words. Eve, is there anything you would like to say?
For me, it's just to say, don't be afraid, you're not alone. Find a confidant. A problem shared, it's a problem half solved. Thank you.
Beautiful words, Eve. Melanie.
I'm happy to be here and continue to support this awareness creating events, these kinds of events. And of course, feel free to reach out to me either directly or via Therese for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And we'll share our email address in the chat box. Joseph.
Thank you. One thing that I would like to see is greater accountability for managers, not just on the productivity issues for the work that we're doing in the UN, but also for the well-being responsibilities that they have. So I'm a big advocate of 360 evaluations or something similar, where we can get more information about management and how our teams are being encouraged to not only be productive, highly productive and efficient, but also taking care of themselves. And I think we have some work to do around that. And I do think it's possible, but we need to have some hard conversations about that too. Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, I want to sort of give you all a round of applause. I feel honoured and blessed to be able to work with you all. Stephen, Eve and Melanie, thank you so much for sharing your stories. And it like you have made a difference to the UN system today, and I cannot thank you enough for that. I know when we have these events, the conversations go on and there is a ripple effect that you won't even know what the impact has been. So I cannot thank you enough. Tanya and Joseph, thank you for bringing your amazing experience and words of advice. So I'm not listening your input as well, but obviously the words of our colleagues sharing their experiences were so important. There's a lot for us. There's a lot for me to go away and think about in terms of where to from here. I think there is a lot for everybody around who is here today to think about. How can you support colleagues? How can we make sure we're all taking a role to be champions within our workplace in whatever role we might have, but also making sure we're taking steps to look after our own mental health and well-being, whether that is doing something different to make sure we are putting our mental health and well-being first. And if you're not okay, remember it's okay to reach out for help. We'll make sure we share again the counsellors in the chat. They're a fantastic resource. And as we've heard from people, don't feel like you're alone. Do reach out if you need help. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We really appreciate your time. I'm sorry we've gone over, but I could not bear to finish it any earlier. So thank you, everybody. And thank you for coming to our final event for World Mental Health Month. I'm sure we'll have more events over the course of the year. We've got a lot of information to unravel, and we will likely have more events over the course of the year. So thank you again to everybody.
Thank you, Therese.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Therese, and thank you, colleagues.